Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Klingstein. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Klingstein with SEMA Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. This week, we're happy to have join us for our 100th episode, Daniel Mueller. Daniel is a pioneer in the area of executive coaching. He has coached over 1,500 CEOs as well as executive leaders in his career. He has a passion around helping people become better, both personally as well as professionally. He's written a number of books in his career, and he serves as the managing director of SOLIDleaders. He has just some great insights to share around leadership and managing your career and your life. And we're looking forward to today's conversation with Daniel. First off, just give us a little bit of an overview of your career and a little bit of your story.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Mark. Appreciate being here. So I started out as a college dropout and had the unfortunate event of becoming a single parent. And so I was raising my daughter full time, and I was mom and dad 24/7, and I needed to scramble to make ends meet. And so I got into sales. From there, I got into sales management, and I became a sales executive. Then I became CEO of a company that was selling training and development services in the healthcare space. I sold that company. Then I became CEO of a management consulting firm, grew that and sold that company. Then I became CEO of an organizational design and development firm. And I realized that OD, which is really should be ODD, organizational design and organizational development, ODD, odd. But OD on the macro level is change management for a company. On the micro level, it's change management for the individual. So I heard about this thing called executive coaching happening in the 70s, and psychiatrists were really fixing, and psychologists were fixing problem children in the Fortune 500, CEOs and senior executives. And I thought there was a better way that we should be providing this service to high potential executives. So 33 years ago, I started providing executive coaching to high potential CEOs and senior executives. And I've been doing that ever since. I've had about 1,500 engagements so far. And it's just been an amazing ride. But my real focus today, most of the time, is on executive health, executive organizational health, executive team health. And so having a healthy executive team requires everyone pulling in the same direction, aligned with a vision, aligned with a set of goals and objectives, and everyone working on themselves, growing themselves. So I do CEO and entire team executive coaching, where I'll work with the CEO and help them develop to the next level as a leader. And then I'll help the individual members of the executive team also grow and develop to that next level of functional effectiveness. And then I will do team cohesiveness work to make sure that everyone is totally tight and cohesive on the team and pulling in the same direction.
If you were able to go back to a 22-year-old Daniel and give him some advice, what advice would you give him?
Right. Well, the advice that I'd give him is the advice that I actually did receive a couple of years after that. So at around 25, 26 years old, I was given advice by this guy, Jim. And Jim was a mentor of mine, and he said, Daniel, stick with the winners. And that's what I have done. So I have stuck with those executives that are winners. So there's winners and losers, and we can get into an interesting discussion around what is a winning executive. But I would say one that has it all, right? They're a great person, and they're a great leader. They're a great manager. They're just great at everything. And I have stuck with those people my entire career. And in fact, there are people that I have coached back 25 years ago that I'm still coaching today. They have since grown to be now board members of major companies around the world. But I started out when they were VPs, and I went from VP, SVP, C-suite, CEO, and now board member. So stick with the winners, and that's good advice for anyone. Stick with those people that are really going places and that are good human beings.
So think back, a lot of the listeners to this podcast are first-time leaders, whether they're leading their first team or first-time CEOs. What do you advise as far as, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the mistakes that you see first-time leaders make, and some of your advice to them?
Right. Well, everybody has their first time in a VP role, first time in a C-suite, first time CEO, first time board member. And right. I use the metaphor of playing golf. If this is your first time playing golf, it would be better to get a lesson or two to learn how to hold the club. But then if you're good at golf, but you want to get serious about the game and you really want to shave 5 or 10 strokes off your score, you should get a coach to help you, because on the outside looking in, it's so much easier to see what you're doing wrong. And there's mistakes that everyone makes that are just first-timer mistakes, right? And so having somebody on the outside. And so one of the things I'm most proud of as an executive coach is that I don't try to be the end-all, be-all outsider. One of the first things I do when I start working with somebody is I say to them, well, who's your mentors? And let's get some mentors around you. Let's get some very intentional mentorship, and let's help you grow. And so we looked for a number of different resources. Unpaid resources, by the way. People are willing to do it. The gray hairs like me and you, Mark, right, are willing to invest in that next generation coming up, right? A been there, done it, 5-time over CEO is definitely going to be willing to invest time in a first-time CEO, helping that CEO to avoid the pitfalls that they fell into during their first or second time. So, stick with the winners. Get help, get outside help, outside mentorship, outside coaching. Obviously, I strongly believe in coaching. It works, and it'll make you millions of dollars if you're an executive.
So think about, and I have a number of executives that are thinking about kind of that first board seat you mentioned, as far as, kind of the progression of your career, that you're, a VP, moving to C-suite,
Sure.
For some it's a CEO. But what is the importance of being on a board, whether a nonprofit or a corporate board? Talk a little bit about that and some of the advice you give somebody as they're looking at that as a potential add to their
Sure.
portfolio.
Well, one of the books I've written is called Executive Portfolio Life, and it's on Amazon, Executive Portfolio Life. And it came about as I recognized patterns. So I guess one of my gifts, one of the superpowers I have is the ability to do good pattern recognition. And I started this 33 years ago. So as I'm watching executives, and I was 30 years old at the time, and I'm watching these executives that are 50 and 60-year-old transition into retirement and fail miserably, right? Just failed miserably. And some of them were very successful. And I watched the patterns, and I wrote a book on the subject. And it was 20 years of research in the making. So it's a culmination of 20 years of watching this pattern of hundreds and hundreds of executives, CEOs and senior executives, transition into retirement. And so it's called portfolio life, because just like you diversify an investment portfolio, and you have stocks, bonds, CDs, cash, gold, whatever, real estate, you diversify your career portfolio. And your career portfolio, the most common thing they do when they're not working a full-time job is sitting on boards. So in portfolio life, and that's a synonym for semi-retirement, because that's really the wisdom, is never retire, but do semi-retirement type activities, a portfolio, a smorgasbord of activities. Now, the number one thing that you want to do in portfolio life in semi-retirement is sit on boards. That's the most popular thing. Well, it's more and more difficult than ever to get on a board. And there's many reasons why, but the point is that don't wait till you're 55, 60, 65 years old to start trying to get on boards, because the first thing that people are going to ask you, a CEO say, why should I have you on my board? How much board experience do you have? And you say, well, this will be my first time. Bad answer. So you want to start getting experience to see. So I believe in dabbling. I believe in experimenting early on in your career, as early as possible, to test. And so I've identified 10 major things that people do in semi-retirement, in portfolio life. Sitting on boards is one of them. And the idea is dabble now in your, say, 40s or your 50s to figure out nonprofit boards, for-profit boards. What kind of for-profit board? Is it a VC-backed board? Is it a private equity-backed board? Is it a privately held board? Is it a publicly traded board? So dabble now, figure it out, and then you'll have a clearer vision for where you're going when you're not working a full-time job.
Yeah, I think we talked earlier in a previous conversation about like after an executive retires, at 6 months into retirement, typically they figure out this isn't for me. I'm starting to lose my edge, and right. I think they're miserable, and they're also making people around them miserable. To talk a little bit as far as how to prepare for that. I know your book is definitely one resource, but talk a little bit more about that transition.
How to prepare for that transition. Right. Well, the thing is, again, to dabble, to think about it, right? Think about, what would I do best when I'm not working a full-time job? It doesn't mean you have to be working at it full-time, and that's the whole idea of portfolio. A portfolio, a smorgasbord. If you think about a pie chart, and you could say this pie chart represents 20 hours a week. But that pie chart is going to be divided up into sitting on board number 1 for a few hours, board number 2, board number 3. And then I'm going to do a little speaking, a little teaching at a college, a high school, a university, a grad school. I'm going to do a little bit of consulting, maybe a little coaching. Maybe you'll join the Solid Leaders team. I'll put in a plug for Solid Lead, www.solidleaders.com. Maybe you'll join the Solid Leaders team and come and be a coach with us. Who knows what? But the thing is to think about it and then to write out a plan. And if you'll do that and you'll decide what you want to do in portfolio life, then start reverse engineering and say, okay, what is the ideal executive role I need to have that will launch me successfully into portfolio life? So that last job should be your very best job. Your last full-time executive role should be your very best. Now, Mark, most times, more than 50%, that is not the case. In other words, more than 50% of the time, the last executive role that an executive has is not their best role. And many executives finish on a whimper. In other words, what they do is they Peter Principle themselves out. Peter Principle says that the principle says you get promoted to your highest level of incompetence. So red flags go up when I'm talking to a 60-year-old or a 55-year-old, and that person is saying, I want to be a CEO. I'm saying, great. How many times have you been a CEO? They say, well, this will be my first. Danger. Chances are you will fail at that role. So the time to have been a CEO is in your 30s or 40s for the first time. And if you're just going to be a first-time CEO in your late 50s, man, most of them fail. Over 50% get fired or quit in their first year. As it is, a seasoned CEO or a seasoned senior executive, 20% fired or quit in their first year in a VP level role and above. And that's why executive search firms like you are there, Mark, because people hire you and they say, I'm not going to take a chance of hiring somebody who's going to get fired or quit in their first year. So I'm going to hire Mark and his firm so that we reduce that risk, because you guys have some really excellent vetting processes and recruitment processes to really make sure that the person recruited is going to stay for 3 to 5 years or whatever the needs are of the company. So point is that get experience now, figure out now, reverse engineer, and make sure that your last job is your very best job ever. You should finish with like a cymbal roll crescendo. Shh, and a big splash, splashing social media, splashing with whatever success, like a big exit, is a great way to enter portfolio life.
So thinking back, and I think it's great for those that are earlier in their career to be thinking about the end of their career and kind of how that they need to, I think I've heard this said is people spend more time planning their vacation than they do their career. And right. So I think there's definitely needs to be that intentionality as far as of taking a look at where you want to go and where you want to end up. Thinking back to, again, that 30 something person who is in that leadership role, and they've got that, they may be even earlier than that, they had their first team. What mistakes do you see people make as far as in hiring their team or managing their first team?
Oh man, I'm going to stand up for this one because I'll tell you what, this is a soapbox for me. I would say this, that one of the mistakes is not using a retained search firm and trying to do it on your own. So retained search firms are worth their weight in gold. But mistakes are hiring somebody that you know and hiring them just because you know them and you're comfortable with them and not because they can do the job. Hiring somebody that you haven't thoroughly vetted because you were in desperate need to fill a hole and you moved too quickly. Third common mistake is not doing behavioral assessments. I know you guys do behavioral assessments, and I think that's best practices. But there's a lot of companies that a lot of CEOs and senior executives that just don't use any kind of behavioral testing. So they bring somebody in, and it's just a huge advantage to have some under the cover insight into their behavioral preferences, because behaviors matter. And the person's behavioral style really matters, because that's kind of the secret of chemistry, right? And if your behavioral style is not a good fit for the person that you're hiring, your direct report, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be disappointed in the way they're interfacing with you, the way they function, the way they behave. So it's good to get that out on the table early. Hiring without a job description, huge mistake. Hiring without really vetting the person through the board. Like if you're the CEO, and I have a CEO I'm coaching right now, Jay, and Jay is introducing his chief revenue officer candidate, who I actually know and recommended to Jay, and Doug is going to get vetted by the board. Now, Jay could have hired the CRO without sharing him with the board, but to get the board's thumbprint on Doug makes so much sense. Boards like surprises twice a year, just like CEOs, their birthday and Christmas. Right. So don't surprise your board. Don't surprise your CEO. Yes, you can do it on your own. Yes, you have the authority to hire this person, Ms. VP of development. But why not run it by your boss? Why not run that hire by your boss? Get your boss's thumbprint and say, "Yep, I like this person. Good job." So if it blows up, and many times they do blow up, but if it blows up, at least you've had that buy-in to fall back on, that, hey, we were both fooled. We both didn't see it, right? But again, 20% are fired or quit in their first year in a new executive role. So you got a 1 in 5 chance of screwing up on your best day. So you might as well, cover your bases.
So we talked about getting on a board. the importance of that and doing it. And you mentioned dabbling and figuring that out, what's the best fit early on. But for somebody going in, maybe the first time that they're a CEO of a company or a nonprofit, talk a little bit about that, just the mindset that somebody needs to go in if they're thinking about, working with a board. I think sometimes people think, well, I've reached the pinnacle. I'm the CEO. I don't have anybody I report to. And so they quickly figure that out, that's not the case.
Well, control at the CEO level is a total illusion. What you find when you're CEO is that you have actually less control than you thought you would ever have in your career. And think about it. What you're doing is you're hiring some very, very bright, capable people to run your various functions. So your head of marketing, your head of sales, your head of development, your head of engineering, your head of customer success. All those folks do not want to be micromanaged by you. And so you really don't have a lot of control. You have the kind of control the board has. You can hire and you can fire. You can do your best to performance manage that person, but really at the end of the day, they're running their function and you need to get out of the way to a certain degree. But where to get out of the way and where to intervene, how to intervene, when to intervene, how to best interface with these high-powered executives. Remember, you were one of those once, right? How did you want to be interfaced with your CEO? So I believe that CEOs should be good mentors to their direct reports and be a coach to their direct reports. So the whole concept of CEO as coach or even executive as coach, because you can extrapolate this. If you're a VP and above, I really believe that you should be coaching your direct reports. And it's not just having transactional one-on-ones where you're talking about what have you done for me lately. I'm talking about truly developing each person. And so Nancy needs to grow in her delegation skills. And Sally, she needs to be a better time manager. And Henry, he needs to do a better job of conflict management. Each of your direct reports, wherever you are in the food chain, has something different that they need to work on. So if you are working with each one of them and there's a transparency there, and I really believe in transparency, where you're transparent with them and say, hey, I don't do this, and this very well. I don't do these things very well. You don't do these things very well. We're both screwed up. We both have issues. We both have challenges. I'm working on mine. I want to help you work on yours. And you could also help me work on mine. So maybe I'm not a great time manager. You can help me. I'll be coachable. So I think coachability is one of the things, going full circle here to what to look for as you're an executive hiring people. I would look for coachability. I would put that very, very high on the list of things that I look for in a candidate. Is this person going to be willing to learn from me and from others? Are they coachable, or do they know it all already? And, there's a lot of executives out there that are just absolutely perfect. Don't hire those.
Right. So talk a little bit, you mentioned coachability is one characteristic of a winning executive, somebody that's going to be successful. What are some of the other qualities that you see kind of over and over again? I know you can look at some of the most successful executives and they can have completely different personalities from each other. They're bent differently as far as kind of how they're wired. But what are some of the characteristics that you see that kind of is a common thread?
Well, I would say just if we're at a 50,000 foot level, it's knowing themselves really well. Hence the reason why you want to do some behavioral testing and assessment, because you want to validate that they do know themselves. And they'll self-validate that instrument to say, yep, that's me. That's my strengths. That's my weaknesses. This is my behavioral preferences. And each behavioral style comes with strengths and weaknesses. So you get that right out on the table. So I want to see an executive that really knows who they are. not only in a skill set level, what are their strengths and weaknesses in skills, but also in abilities. What are they able to do? Also in their behavioral style, what are their behavioral preferences? Can they identify the behavioral styles of others? Do they know how to offset their weaknesses through hiring? Because, the perfect executive does not exist. There is no such thing. But the executive that has a perfect understanding of their strengths and their weaknesses does exist. Mm-hmm. And that's what you want to look for. Someone that really understands their strengths and weaknesses. And your job in the interview process, I believe, is to get under the covers somehow, some way, and figure that out. What is this person's real strengths and real weaknesses? And the name of the game, if you're a candidate, is don't show your weaknesses. I love the interview question. Well, tell me about your weaknesses. And the answer, the canned answer is, well, I work too much.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's a sense of kind of the personality or the bigger than life CEO who is kind of that big personality and maybe doesn't have a life that's balanced. They're just
right.
They're working that 100-hour a week, and all their other relationships are being destroyed. Talk a little bit about that of balance.
Sure.
As far as
executive. It's interesting, Mark. Sorry to cut you off, but work-life balance is a real total misnomer for the executive world. There is no such thing. It is an out of balance world. You're out of balance. You are working 60 and 70 hours a week. That's not balance, okay? You're topside on work. But the right answer, or the right thinking around this, in my opinion, is work-life integration. So how can you really integrate your work with your personal life? And that is possible. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the challenge. So work-life integration looks like the executive will disengage at 6 p.m., fully engage with his or her spouse for dinner, fully engage with the children and be fully present with the children if there are children for the bedtime and the evening hours, and then be able to dial in to email at 9 o'clock at night and do maybe a half hour or an hour's worth of email from 9 to 10, and then fully disengage from that, and then re-engage with a spouse going to sleep and fully engage in that period. And then, it might be get up early in the morning and fully engage in some type of healthy morning routine. This morning I got up at 5. I had a personal trainer at my home at 5:30. I worked out from 5:30 to 6:30, and then I had some quiet time and some time for prayer and reflection and meditation. And then I was fully present for stuff that I have going on in my work world. But and then I disengaged for an hour where I was able to interface with my wife and help her with a project, and then fully engage again. So that ability to disengage and engage is a learned skill, and it's very difficult to do. So some executives, most executives really, have to really work at this, that they're either always on or they're totally off. You just can't do that. Even on vacation, you go on vacation, and it's nice to think, oh, I'm going to totally turn it off. No, you might need to do 1 hour every single day of email because, 7 days later, you have 500 emails in your inbox and you've missed some very important things. So how do you integrate your work with your life? And it's very possible, but it takes intentionality.
So outside of work, what do you do to recharge? You mentioned kind of your morning routine is, I'm sure, part of that, but what else do you do that outside?
Well, I have a very short attention span. So yesterday I played 9 holes of golf instead of 18. But I play golf, tennis, and a whole bunch of other things. I like triathlons, so running, swimming, biking, and then I like things that I could do with the family. So ping pong, pool, and a few other hobbies like that.
Neat. So you mentioned a couple of sites. I always ask what people are reading, and why don't you give a couple of your books that you've written, and then anything else that you think somebody should have on their reading list as a leader?
Sure. Well, I mean, if you want a book that just came out, that I just wrote, that really was the 12 best books on the subject of leadership that I could find, and I basically wrote about them in this book called Your Customer Compass. So Your Customer Compass is about 4 vectors: north, south, east, west. And so as you're looking and you're standing there, everyone has 4 vectors worth of customers. So we typically think of our customers external to our organization. But the truth is that if you're a CEO and you look north, there's your board, and you have to serve them. They are a customer. If you look south, there's your direct reports. You have to serve them. If you look east, those are your traditional customers, and west, those are your peers. So 360-degree, north, south, east, west, you have customers to serve, and there's a compass, Your Customer Compass. That's the name of the book. And in there, I quote 12 of the best authors on leadership that I know. So it's it's like reading 12 other books, people's books. And I got permission from all of them, which is amazing. Very famous people like Jim Collins, Good to Great, Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, 5 Temptations of a CEO. So anyway, that's a book that I recommend. And then Executive Portfolio Life, I think, is a great book, quite biasedly. I think that's a good read. And then Strategic Execution for Executives is another book. And all 3 of these are on Amazon. The best executives I know read, and they read on a regular basis. You do not have to know it all. You just have to know where to go for the answers. So I believe in selective reading on areas that are your weakest areas. So we typically read in areas of our greatest interest or our greatest strength. So I'll leave you with this thought. I'll leave your listeners with this thought. One of the things that I have seen that's a pattern, one of the most common patterns I've seen in my 33 years of executive coaching now is this: a strength overused becomes a weakness. Mm-hmm. So this whole idea of playing to our strengths, overdone, and it's often overdone, leads to weaknesses. So our greatest strengths actually can become our weaknesses if overdone. So we have to really watch that, and we have to read in areas of weakness. Where are you weakest? And so I have this competency model, 5 categories of competency. The center circle, character, core character. It's the least measured but the most important aspect of a top executive. And 4 other quadrants: execution, getting stuff done; relationship, getting along with others; management of people and processes; and leadership, the art of influence. And so those 5 categories of competency need to be strong. And that core character, which is in the center, is like the hub or the axle of a wheel. And if that's weak, your whole wheel is worthless. But then those 4 have to be in balance: execution, relationship, management, leadership. And so the book, Strategic Execution for Executives, is really about that first competency, which is the most often measured, is execution. So executives that do not execute are really not executives.
Absolutely. Well, you have cram-packed a lot of great thoughts in a 30-minute period of time, and definitely appreciate all of your words of wisdom today. And Daniel, could you give again ways somebody could find out more about you and what you're working on?
Sure. Daniel at SOLIDleaders.com, and then 832-732-9395. Yeah, I give 3 complimentary coaching sessions. No strings attached, no sales pitch. I never sell coaching. What I do is 3 legitimate, impactful, transformational coaching sessions for anyone who wants to explore what executive coaching is. The only catch, you have to be a bona fide executive. In other words, just can't be a wannabe executive. You can't just have the title but not really be an executive. You have to be a VP level and above executive. And then I will give you 3 complimentary coaching sessions to experience what executive coaching can do for you.
Great. Well, thank you, Daniel. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us for our 100th episode. And this is definitely, I know, going to be helpful for those that are listening.
Mark, my pleasure, and great celebrating with you. Happy 100th episode.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.